Dynasty trade targets by position. This is where I go over everything. Running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, tight ends. Who are the biggest buys? Who are the biggest sells in Dynasty fantasy football right now? As you guys are seeing this will be my last video for the next 25 days or so because I will be in Mexico for most of the month of March. Still be making content, but of course you will not see this background for a little bit of time. Couple quick housekeeping notes before we get into the running back position. Dynasty trade value chart live with a new update that includes 2025 rookie picks, so you can compare, your Breece Hall versus the 2025, 104 or whatever. And also we have the rookies in that Dynasty trade value chart ranked amongst the veterans. So if you're interested in that, flockfantasy.com, link for that is down below in the pinned comment. Draft guide also live as well. So let's get right into it. The running back position is the position we're going to start with right now because I think this time of year especially, the running back position is the most kind of pertinent to talk about when it comes to buying and selling on the open market. As I talked about in the video of this back in January, generally this is a seller's market. In the offseason, before the draft and before free agency, you usually want to offload risk off of your roster. You don't want to be holding a bunch of running backs if you can help it. And also, especially when people are just kind of projected for a new role, projected for more volume, that's what you want to sell the illusion of volume to your league mates. But that being said, there are a few veterans that I do think are good trade options right now. And in our Dynasty trade value chart, you can see how they're highlighted. As you can see on the screen, Breece Hall, Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard, J.K. Dobbins, and Tajay Spears, according to my Dynasty rank of them, versus their keep trade cut value. There's a little bit of value to be had there. And you can also see, based on the league format that you're in, Superflex, one quarterback when it comes to 2025 picks or future rookie picks, 26 and 27, you can see what I'd be valuing these players at. This is how I value the players. In the buy section, you could probably hope to get these guys for a little bit cheaper than this. In the sell section, you probably want to get a little bit more than what I have listed. So Breece Hall, the first guy that we're going to talk about here, we are just 1 year removed from Breece Hall thinking he might be the best running back in the NFL, one of the safest picks in fantasy going back to the redraft season this year. He finished as a top 6 point per game option as a second-year running back, 1 year removed from an ACL tear, with Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle as his quarterbacks with a terrible offensive line. I get he had a bad year this year, but when you flash that type of ability the way that Breece Hall did in the 2023 season, and Aaron Rodgers kind of threw things out of whack this year, the line was bad again. Breece Hall himself admittedly didn't play as well as he did in 2023, and his receiving role went down. He had 95 targets, which led the position in 2023 down to targets numbers in the 70s this year. I think this is a guy that is destined to bounce back. He's in a contract season. The Jets are probably not going to address the position. I know there's some people thinking that they might add to this running back group, but because they drafted Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis last year, I don't think that's very likely. Breece Hall is probably going to be the bell cow yet again, catching a lot of passes. We don't know what they're going to do at quarterback just yet, but I still feel pretty confident that Breece Hall is still that dude, and I'm not overly worried. And I know Aaron Glenn and the new offensive coordinator there are probably going to want to reestablish the run game that they had in Detroit, and Breece Hall is the guy to do that. So he is one of my biggest buys right now, particularly for those of you guys that have really good teams and you're looking to add like a hammer running back, not likely to get replaced, who can really help out your chances of winning. Chase Brown, normally I'd be saying to avoid buying a player like this, but here's the thing with Chase Brown. Number one, the market hasn't gone crazy on him. I don't think anybody's expecting that the Bengals will add nothing to the backfield. Right now, we did a video a couple days ago going over the contract situations, which NFL teams need running backs. And the Bengals have so many needs on defense, and they still have Zach Moss under a decent-sized contract. And they showed so much faith in Chase Brown that I doubt really, other than a day 2 running back being added or a significant free agent getting added, I don't think Chase Brown would really lose his job. And also, I don't think it's likely that the Bengals would do that, seeing as they have so many needs on defense. They're trying to get their edge rusher, Trey Hendrickson, and their top 2 receivers re-signed. The market isn't getting carried away with Chase Brown. They showed so much faith in him as a team. He was a top 5 running back rest of season after week 10 when he took over the job. And he is valued right now as like the RB 12 on the market right now. Like, people aren't going crazy with him, which is really nice. And for a guy, like I said, who only Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and Jahmyr Gibbs outscored down the stretch of the season after week 9 with a 9.4 utilization score, which led all running backs, you'd expect a guy like that to go up really high in dynasty value. And people have kind of maintained their cool on him. And the second, let's say it's just a Damian Martinez round 5 pick that gets added, I still think Chase Brown is the dude here, and he has a very good chance to return a lot of value to people who go buy him right now. Chuba Hubbard and J.K. Dobbins, I did talk about in the January version of this video, and I'll link that one down below because there's a couple pieces of overlap in this video, but they are still definitely good options to go and buy. Jonathan Brooks is out probably for next year because he retore his ACL at the end of the 2024 season, and I do think Chuba Hubbard, given the contract he has, doubt they add to this position much with the fact that they've invested in Jonathan Brooks and Chuba Hubbard, both financially and from a draft standpoint. I don't really think they're going to add much to this backfield, and I do think Chuba Hubbard has a chance to be a top 12 running back yet again, and he's not that old. He's a guy that can produce at a high level. To me, he's undervalued given his role and his age. J.K. Dobbins could be re-signed by the Los Angeles Chargers. We'll have to wait and see. He could sign with a new team. He's expressed interest in coming back to the team. He knows the system. He knows the scheme. His market price right now, according to Keep Trade Cut, is about a late second-round pick. And to me, I'm willing to pay that. I know there's a lot of great running backs in this class, and you could very easily just re-roll on J.K. Dobbins into a young rookie running back. But I think he'd be worth an early second if he were the Chargers starting running back right now. And I do think there's a very good chance that he signs a 2-year deal back with the Los Angeles Chargers. And he was the RB 18 in points per game last year, one of the best late round picks that you could have made. So for me, I think J.K. Dobbins is a half decent swing. Again, if you have to pay an early second for him, definitely don't do that. But late second, maybe even an early third, I do think that's going to fly in some people's leagues. So Tyjae Spears, another buy that I really like at the running back position among the veterans here. Spears is a great player. At the very worst, he's an elite handcuff. We know when Pollard was out last year, he was absolutely spectacular. And given the Titans' needs, obviously they're picking first overall, they got a lot of needs, and they specifically want to upgrade the quarterback position, want to upgrade the wide receiver position, probably want to upgrade on defense. This offense and this team is going to be a much better unit going forward, and Spears could win this job outright without an injury to Tony Pollard. Maybe he just gets banged up during the season. I think Spears is just that good of a player for a third-year running back who's shown a lot in his first 2 seasons with an aging 28-year-old running back ahead of him on the depth chart who has an out after this season in his contract. I think a mid to late second is worthwhile to swing at Tyjae Spears because I do think he has quite a bit of upside. And again, people aren't getting carried away with him because Tony Pollard is there. If Pollard were to get cut, he'd probably go way up in value, and I'd be maybe even talking about selling him. But knowing that he's not really listed as the starter right now, people haven't gotten over their skis on Tyjae Spears. So the other thing that I want to really hammer home here is the rookie running back class is undervalued on the market right now. Obviously, in sharp, really, really tuned in leagues, a lot of people are not going to be willing to sell, let's say, the 105 to the 109, where that honeypot of rookie running backs, Quinton Judkins, Trevion Henderson, Amarian Hampton, Caleb Johnson are going to go. But in more casual leagues, you might be able to get away with selling off productive players from last year into that range of the draft. Like, for example, someone who had Derrick Henry last year might be looking to get off of that older running back asset and flipping it into a young running back like we have plenty of in this class. Like, for example, I have 13 running backs inside my top 25 overall players in this class. And I'm sure by the time I'm done scouting the class, it'll be damn near 20, 24 running backs inside my top 40. So we're talking about first round picks being valuable for running backs, second round rookie picks being valuable for running backs, third round rookie picks being valuable for running backs. I think if you are looking to address your running back position, I talked about some veteran buys, but the absolute best thing you can do is address rookies in this class, because when it comes to like Quinton Judkins, Byshell Tootin, Cam Scadaboo, and Raheem Sanders, as you can see there, my rank relative to Keep Trade Cut rank, I am way ahead of market on those specific players. The rest of these running backs, I'm pretty much ahead of market on as well. But still, like, your league mates likely don't know how deep this running back class is, likely don't know how good this running back class is, unless they're all very, very attuned to the Dynasty, Twitter space or whatever the case is. So if you're worried about sending away capital to get running back help in the form of like a Tyjae Spears or a J.K. Dobbins, you don't want to send away a mid to late second for one of those guys, that's totally fine. Keep that pick and spend it on a running back, because there's a very good chance you're going to have running back options available to you. And hell, go buy more mid to late second round picks. Go buy more third round picks even, because I think you're going to get good options in both cases. In first round of rookie drafts, second round of rookie drafts, third round of rookie drafts, wherever you are on the board, you're probably going to find a decent swing at running back there, just given how strong this class is from top to bottom, all the way down to like the Giddens, RJ Harvey, LaQuint Allen types. I think we're talking about guys who go early day 3 at the absolute latest in NFL draft capital, 4th, 5th round, and fill out some roles in the NFL. And I do think a lot of these guys, when we look back 5 years from now, are going to end up by the end of their rookie contracts having been starters for a couple of years, probably 10 guys at least from this class. So definitely take swings at this rookie running back class. Again, I think that's fairly obvious to a lot of people, but I wanted to hammer it home for a lot of you guys that are maybe new around here. some sells at the running back position. This is probably the more important part of this video, at least at running back, because this time of year is the perfect time to sell off some risky assets and punt them into rookie picks, especially when you know you can just replace the exact same position with the position that you just sold off. Kenneth Walker, Derrick Henry, Tony Pollard, Najee Harris, and Braylon Allen are a couple of the guys that I think are a little bit overvalued on the market right now. With Kenneth Walker, the vibes are just not good. He's been banged up for multiple years. A lot of fantasy docs say he has a lot of chronic kind of groin issues and things of that nature. Zach Charbonnet was really good in his absence last year. This could be the year with Kenneth Walker on the final year of his rookie deal that things start to even out in this backfield when both are healthy. And if anything, actually, I think Charbonnet could take the reins in this backfield, knowing that Walker's a free agent after this year. Kenneth Walker, just 24 years old, not a bad asset to have by any means. I think he would probably get a nice free agent deal if he were to hit the open market, but he kind of just feels like a house of cards asset right now, where Charbonnet could very easily take over the backfield because they're pretty comparable talent level, and I don't think that is worth a top 15 running back ranking in Dynasty, which is where he still ranks in top 12 in some cases. So for me, shop Kenneth Walker, see what you can get for him. Again, I don't think he's necessarily the worst asset in the world to hold, because I think he's a good player and I think he should be a starting running back at least in other places after this season if Kenneth Walker does lose his job. But I would sell him. If you can get close to a first round pick for him, like I said already, with the sells, this is where I value them. 201 to 204 is where I value Kenneth Walker in a super flex league, 110 to 112 in a one quarterback league. But ideally, you can get a little bit more than what I have listed here for the sells. For the buys, you want to get them for a little bit less. The sells, a little bit more is what you're looking for. Derrick Henry, I'm sure you guys know what I'm about to say. He's 31 years old. He's still playing well. That's great. If you have a competitive team and you just want to hold Derrick Henry, totally fine with that. But in some people's leagues, you might be able to re-roll him right into an early second, right into even potentially a late first round pick. And knowing the strength of this running back class, to me, that just feels like a no-brainer, man. Like, I get you could get one more good, really solid RB1 season out of Derrick Henry, but knowing how good this class is, how good the prospects are, if I could re-roll Derrick Henry into Caleb Johnson right now, imagine how easy of a decision that can be, knowing I could be getting a multiple-time RB1 in the future versus maybe Derrick Henry's got one more year left in the tank. So that would be what I would do. His price tag right now in a lot of casual leagues is close to a late first, and given the strength of this class, it feels like a no-brainer to me. Tony Pollard, I discussed with kind of Tajay Spears. Efficiency dropped off from week 10 onward. He was like 50, 60 PFF rushing grades from that point onward, dealing with a lot of injuries, 28 years old. Wouldn't shock me at all if the right decision, we look back a year from now, was, yeah, we definitely should have been selling Tony Pollard, because we all should have seen Tajay Spears about to take over the backfield, and you could still get probably a mid to late second round pick for Tony Pollard, and I would be willing to sell him either straight up for Tajay Spears if you could, or just in general to re-roll into this rookie class. Najee Harris is another guy that I think is really interesting because he's an unrestricted free agent this year, and Spotrac has him listed as the best available free agent in terms of projected market value on the open market for NFL teams, because there's a couple of teams that need running back, and he's very durable, and he's been really reliable throughout the course of his career. I think some of your league mates will copium their way into thinking like the Cowboys will sign him to like a workhorse deal or something like that. They're going to think of the best possible scenario and not that, hey, maybe he's just not that great of a player and he goes to a backfield that already has a guy, and they're just going to be splitting touches. If you could, and people are, especially before free agency, when you guys are watching this, people are thinking he's going to get a top of market deal to be a workhorse for somebody, I would be re-rolling Najee Harris right now into an early to mid second if you could. And definitely if you can get anything more than that, I would be doing it. Braylon Allen is really interesting because he's so young. I mean, he's barely 21 years old. He's valued as a top 36 guy right now, which to me, I get it because he's really young. And if you can hold him until, let's say, Breece Hall is a free agent after this year. But to be honest, what I already talked about with Breece Hall is that I expect a bounce back, and I expect him to get extended by the Jets as a result of that bounce back. So you have a handcuff in Braylon Allen. Like, I know he would go up in a lot of value if Breece Hall were to move on in free agency. I just think Breece is so good that he's going to have a bounce back year and he's going to stay with the Jets. So that's kind of just like my prognostication on the situation. But 21-year-old running back being valued as a top 36 guy who clearly has some ability, I get it. I just personally would be shopping Braylon Allen for, again, mid-second round type of capital if you could find it on the open market. A couple of guys that are more soft sells, but definitely depending on your league market, you could definitely get some good stuff for them. Travis Etienne, Ramondre Stevenson, Isaiah Pacheco, DeAndre Swift, and a couple of other guys here. A lot of these dudes are mostly guys that I expect to be impacted by the NFL draft class at the running back position, or just like there's another back in their backfield that's kind of making me nervous, specifically with ETN. Tank Bigsby outplayed him last year. New coaching staff in. Maybe Liam Cohen prefers the style that Tank Bigsby has on early downs. You look at what happened in Tampa Bay with Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. Rachaad White basically just became a third down back by the end of the year, and I could see Travis Etienne having the same fate, and Tank Bigsby is the guy that you want there. So for me, I liked Etienne. I have always liked Etienne. But I'm worried that he's either going to get traded, first of all. He might actually just not even be with the team very much long term. And he also could just be reduced from a role standpoint. He is on the last year of his rookie deal. And I worry about that with Travis Etienne. With Ramondre Stevenson, I get he has a big contract, but it's a new regime that didn't draft him, didn't sign him to that contract. And the last regime tried like hell to replace him. If you remember during the season, we heard multiple times that Antonio Gibson was going to start for the Patriots. And that didn't really happen. Or they tried to make it happen, but Antonio Gibson wasn't really reliable. And I do think that's going to result in them heavily investing in the position, whether it's a free agent like a Najee Harris or a running back in the first, second, third, maybe fourth round at the latest. I think Stevenson's going to have some backfield competition added, as we talked about in that running back video a couple of days back. I'm a little worried about Stevenson, and I would be definitely trying to sell him at this point in time. Same goes for Isaiah Pacheco. There was once a time, and it was just this past offseason, that I thought Pacheco would have a great year and he would get extended by Kansas City as a result of that great year. But when you're a 7th round pick and the team does not have that much invested in you, you pretty much have to be perfect to make sure you don't lose your job. And him getting injured this year, and then once he came back from his injury, not looking very good, I think that's going to stick in the minds of the Kansas City Chiefs brass, and they're probably going to address the position with a second or a third or a fourth round running back, maybe a free agent addition. Maybe they bring back Kareem Hunt, and that's what they end up rolling with. I'm worried about Pacheco, to be honest. I don't think that he has the same type of upside he once did because of what happened this year, and it's really unfortunate for him because it could have resulted in a big contract, but I'm worried about it for sure. DeAndre Swift, Ben Johnson already jettisoned this guy away from his team before. He could definitely do it again. I wouldn't be shocked if the Bears drafted Ashton Genty at 10. Like, to be honest, I really do think it's possible. I really do think it's possible they'll be interested in Trevion Henderson in the second round. So DeAndre Swift, I think he's on thin ice. Definitely try and shop him if you can get early to mid second round capital for pretty much every one of these guys I've talked about so far. That is what I would be aiming for. Re-roll them into a new running back, re-roll them into a different position, whatever the case is. Jerome Ford, some of your league mates might look at the Browns depth chart and see that he's the starter right now, know that he's been getting volume the last couple of years. I'm expecting them to make a splash at this position, specifically in the draft, but maybe in free agency as well. I don't anticipate it'll be Jerome Ford week 1 of 2025 getting the most of the carries. I think they're going to have a running back in-house, either bringing back Nick Chubb potentially after he tests the market, or they go and address Quinshon Judkins in the draft or Ollie Gordon in the draft or something like that. Blake Corum and Jalen Wright are kind of overvalued too because they're being projected for big role increases, which could happen. But again, this class is so deep, to say that those teams don't add more pieces, to me, I think would be foolish. I wouldn't be shocked if the Rams address the running back position in the draft. I wouldn't be shocked if the Dolphins address the running back position in the draft. And also too, I wouldn't be shocked if Kyron gets his old workload next year and Achane gets his old workload this year. Like, it wouldn't really shock me if these guys are still just handcuffs for the most part. And that's why I'm a little bit lower on them than the market seems to be. With Jonathan Brooks, I don't think people are accounting enough for how bad the 2 ACL tears are. Like, you tore his ACL at the same knee twice in 1 calendar year. I don't think people are realizing how bad that is for his future hit rate. And not to mention, at the very least, he's probably going to miss all of 2025, and you can just buy him when there's less risk later on. I think if you have Brooks right now, try and convince a rebuilder that he's going to be the starter in 2026 and just try and sell based on that hopium, because that's definitely not a guarantee. It's very possible Chuba has a great year this year and he's the starter again in 2026. I would be worried about that if I was a Jonathan Brooks manager, which thankfully I didn't get a whole lot of him last year. Really unfortunate he went down. But that being said, that's kind of what happened. And it's just unfortunate that that's the position we're in. But that's where we are. So Javonte Williams, very similar to Najee Harris. I don't really believe he's going to get a huge contract from any team, but maybe try and sell that to an opposing manager. Hey, he's a free agent. Maybe this X, Y, and Z team brings him in. He probably just gets added to annoy us from fantasy perspective and help out a backfield in some form or capacity. So running back was a huge position. I just talked, 20 minutes on running backs alone. this time of year, running back is the one that you want to be kind of day trading on. You want to be trying to acquire these first round, second round, and third round rookie picks, maybe selling off these risky veterans that I talked about. And again, there was a couple of veterans that I was willing to buy, but for the most part, I'm probably steering clear of buying running back production until closer to the season if you are a contender. If you're looking for an RB2 for your lineup, well, you don't have to fill out your lineup until September. So you might as well wait until August when we know how the backfields have shaken out, when we know what the depth charts look like, or at least we have a much better idea of how the backfields will shake out. There's not really much of a point to address buying running backs right now unless you're getting a significant discount on guys that can really climb in value. And I think Spears, for example, is a perfect guy like that who by August could be named the starter of the Titans. Versus, some of the guys that people want to buy right now, which is like, oh, the Steelers have Jaylen Warren and that's it. They're going to give him a full workload. To me, you should be selling guys like that, not buying them. So into the wide receiver position, again, trade strategy for wide receivers is very simple. We want to buy productive wide receivers when we're contending, who have good redraft projections. But when we're rebuilding or we're just kind of buying assets at the wide receiver position in general, just invest in good receivers. Like, it's really that simple. If you have good young receivers, eventually you're going to contend. And Zay Flowers, Chris Olave, some of these guys just fit the bill for that. Contending guys, you can see them at the bottom there with Deebo Samuel, Ridley, and Christian Kirk. They were in the January version of this video, and so was Zay Flowers, actually. With Flowers, he's a very talented wide receiver 2 caliber asset who's tethered to one of the best quarterbacks in the league, probably a future Hall of Famer already, in Lamar Jackson at the height of his prime. I think eventually we're going to get a big season out of Zay Flowers, who's still a very young player. I mean, we got a guy entering his 3rd NFL season who's already been a productive fantasy asset, and he's not even in his prime, quote unquote, yet. So for me, I like Zay Flowers to get better this year, next year, and the following years as he's looking for a big payday from the Ravens. So I like buying Zay Flowers right now for the price that you're going to get him. Like, you could get wide receiver 1 production out of this guy, and I really wouldn't be shocked by it. And he's still very young. If we get a wide receiver 1 season out of him next year, he's going to be a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. And right now you're getting him for like wide receiver 22 kind of price tags. And he's in a good offense. He has a good quarterback. Like, to me, there's a lot to like about Zay Flowers, which is why I'm kind of reissuing him as a buy yet again. Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley, and Christian Kirk, I talked about in January's video. Cheap production pieces that if you're contending and you need wide receivers, I mean, Deebo, I can't imagine is going to cost you more than a mid to late second rounder right now. Ridley, probably not even that, like maybe even a 3rd rounder for Ridley and Kirk, especially Kirk. Like, you can get Kirk for a 3rd rounder right now. And I think he's a good player who can give you PPR production. So I actually like buying those 2 guys as decent options. And then the new guys that are on this list that I didn't talk about in last video, Chris Olave is the big one. A lot of people seem to be down on him. And for me, I get why, because of the concussions and the QB issues and that kind of thing. All I know is that he played 6 healthy games last year. In 4 of those 6 games, he was wide receiver 25 on the week or better. He was producing 12 to 18 to 20 PPR points in 4 of his 6 games last year. Derek Carr is probably going to be the quarterback again because the QB market is so screwed up that no team can find a better option than what they currently have. It's new blood at offensive coordinator, new blood at head coach. Maybe there's an influx of some life into this offense. And for what it's worth, before Shaheed started getting hurt and Olave and Derek Carr started getting hurt, it's not like these guys were bad on offense. I think the Saints can move the ball. I think Chris Olave is just a talented, young, 24-year-old receiver who can command targets at a high level, who knows how much longer he's going to be in this brutal situation. We really don't know. He could be in this brutal situation for half the year this year, another 2 seasons. He could be gone from New Orleans. Like, he's talked about maybe requesting a trade at some point. Just invest in a young receiver, honestly. If you're picking 111, 112, 201, 202, and you're like, I need a receiver, but I don't know if I'm going to get one in the rookie draft, see if you could trade for Chris Olave for that price tag, because he's still very young, like I said, and he can be very productive into the future. His market price could change league to league, because I think there's some leagues that won't value him that low, but there's definitely leagues that will. So Brandon Ayuk, another guy that I want to talk about. I mean, he's seemingly always on my buys list, but I view him as like the perfect 1-year punt asset, because if you think about this logically, he's going to be limited coming back from the torn ACL in 2025. But let's say by week 10, week 11, week 12 of 2025, he starts looking like himself, or hell, maybe he doesn't look like himself all of next season whenever he decides to come back. Deebo is probably going to be gone this year. And whenever Ayuk does come back, he's going to make sure that, Deebo's not there, and he's going to have more targets as a result. Jawan Jennings is on a short-term deal and might be gone after this year as well. And George Kittle is old. Christian McCaffrey is old. Ricky Pearsall is interesting, but I'm not like a super big Ricky Pearsall fan, as you guys know. Pretty soon, Brock Purdy will be one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. And as soon as 2026, it might just be Purdy, Ricky Pearsall, and Brandon Ayuk. And in that case, Brandon Ayuk, as good as he is, if he's 2 years removed from that ACL tear, has the upside to produce a 1,700-yard, 12-touchdown season. He is that good of a player. And I think all of us know that inherently. We just haven't seen quite that level of production yet. And Brandon Ayuk isn't old either. I mean, he's only 27 years old right now. He'll be 27 and a half by the time he's recovered from his ACL tear. He's got a couple more years left in the tank. And I still think the best could be yet to come with Brandon Ayuk in terms of his overall production from a PPR standpoint. Imagine if you got like an 18-point per game season out of Brandon Ayuk in 2026 when he's fully recovered. Let's say by the end of 2025, he starts looking like the number one again, starts playing at a high level. Come 2026, he could just be dominant. I realize he wasn't very good before he got injured last year, but a lot of it is, the 49ers were kind of a mess. And again, they have so many weapons there that are going to start to fall off from the weapons that they had before. Like when Brandon Ayuk was competing for targets with a prime Deebo Samuel, prime Christian McCaffrey, prime George Kittle, it was a lot more difficult for him to command targets than I think it will become 2026. So I'm buying him right now with kind of like a one-year punt mentality. Chris Godwin is a perfect contending buy right now too. And I know this is going to sound like Homer Copium, but dude, the guy was damn near a 20-point per game receiver last year, and the scheme is back, too. It's the same scheme. They're going to use him the same way. Josh Grizzard was the pass game coordinator last year who called all the plays on third down, not Liam Cohn. He called all the plays on third down, and we were number one in the NFL in third down conversions last year. So this is a dude that knows what he's doing. He's now the offensive coordinator. Chris Godwin is going to come back. He is currently a free agent, but I will bet you literally anything he is back with Tampa Bay. He is the second leading receiver behind only his teammate Mike Evans in the history of the franchise. The team wants him back. Jason Light wants him back. Multiple highly respected beat reporters for Tampa Bay have all but guaranteed and staked their reputation that he will be back as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer. He's probably going to get a 2-year, $50 million contract, something like that. Once he does, the 205, 208, or whatever you got to pay for him right now is going to look like a steal, because if you guys are a contending team and you have 3 really good receivers already, you have Jefferson, you have Brian Thomas, and you have, Garrett Wilson, and you're like, I need a 4th receiver who can give me some upside. Chris Godwin is the perfect option to go after, because he might outproduce some of the guys that you have next year, and he's still 28, 29 years old. He's still got a couple years left in the tank as well. So for me, I feel really good about Brandon Ayuk there. Rookie wide receivers as well seem to be a little bit undervalued on the open market. A lot of people are considering this to be a bad wide receiver class. I think Tet McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, Travis Hunter, depending on how much he plays wide receiver, Matthew Golden, and then specifically that second, third tier of wide receivers with Jaden Higgins, Alec Iomanner, Jalen Royals, Trey Harris. Again, fire out some rookie picks. If you want to get a receiver and you don't want to spend the 106 to go get a high-end veteran receiver because you're worried, send the one, just keep the 106 and spend it on Emeka Egbuka or spend it on Luther Burden or somebody like that. And same goes for early second and mid second and late second round picks. You're going to get some of these Jaden Higgins, Alec Iomanner, Jalen Royals types in the mid second round. And you might be able to cash out on some guys that don't have a whole lot of production value left in the tank for those picks. And you'll be able to re-roll into those rookies who are probably going to be second and third round picks in the real NFL draft. So some of the sells at the wide receiver position. Again, the wide receiver position is generally pretty smartly priced. I wouldn't be too worried about selling and buying at this position, but DK Metcalf is a guy that I think is a little overvalued right now. He's reportedly on the trade block. The Seahawks and the Packers apparently have been talking about making a deal for him. He's past the point, really honestly, where he can gain value. He's 27 and a half years old. He probably isn't going to get much better from a fantasy perspective, because we kind of know what he is at this point. He's a downfield weapon. It doesn't really change his fantasy projection all that much to go from Geno Smith to Jordan Love. I get he would probably maybe gain an additional couple touchdowns a year, maybe a couple yards, but I don't know. He's still probably going to be 1,000 yards, 7 to 9 touchdown, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in fantasy. I don't anticipate him going to Green Bay, making him all of a sudden a 1,600-yard receiver. I think he's still limited in what he's capable of doing. Again, maybe that one's a little bit galaxy brainy, and you think that if he went to the Packers, he would go up in value and that kind of thing. But I would maybe try and sell that copium off of DK Metcalf, try and get a mid-first round pick and re-roll him into Emeka Egbuka or something like that if you can. Just saying, if you can. DK is a fine asset. If you want to just hold him, it's totally fine. Jerry Jeudy had an excellent run with the Cleveland Browns this year. I don't think I'd be saying to sell him in most cases, but he's just really inconsistent. His value insulation is virtually nothing. The second a guy like Jerry Jeudy is not producing, try selling him. Nobody wants him at that point. I remember trying to sell him mid-season, and people wouldn't even give me a third-round pick for the guy. The second he's not producing, he gets written off because Steve Smith said he was a shitty route runner or whatever. So, yeah, I get that he's getting probably Cam Ward or some kind of quarterback upgrade coming in, but I do think it's possible they upgrade at wide receiver. I know David Njoku can command targets at a high level. Jerry Jeudy is a guy that, I mean, I didn't think the market would think is a wide receiver 36 caliber asset, but apparently they do. So I'd be interested in seeing what you can get him. I'm not selling him per se. I'm just, how close can you get to a rookie first in 2025 for Jerry Jeudy? That would be my question. If you can't get anywhere close to that, then he's a fine hold. But in some leagues, apparently you can get close to a rookie first, according to Keep Trade Cuts. So QJ, another guy that I think went up in value this year, took some nice steps, but the market has him like wide receiver 40 right now. And all of a sudden, I mean, I still need to see more with Quentin Johnson. I think the Chargers could add wide receivers. He's definitely more exciting now than he was last year as an asset, but it's not like I'm jumping for joy that I have Quentin Johnson on my team. I think knowing that you probably, if you bought him last year, you probably bought him for a third-round pick, and he's worth a mid-second round pick right now, that's a win. That's maybe you could cash out for a mid-second round pick if you wanted to sell him right this second, or you want to hold him and keep seeing what happens because he was a developmental raw rookie or whatever. I don't know. I think the range of outcomes for QJ is that he kind of remains like a wide receiver 4 in fantasy, and that's not a player that's going to really move the needle from an asset standpoint. I would rather just have a mid-second round pick where I can swing big and potentially get a great asset out of it. So that would be my only thoughts on QJ. And then a couple other guys that are just stragglers who I think are overvalued, Dubs and Wicks. They're clearly in the market for wide receiver help in Green Bay. Jaden Reed, to me, is the only safe one, given his role. And because of the Christian Watson injury, it's possible that Dobbs and Wicks might be guys that people are interested in buying from you. Specifically Dobbs, because he seems more reliable, but Wicks too. People might be thinking, oh, Watson tore his ACL. Wicks is going to be like a stud receiver on the outside because a lot of the Dynasty community really liked him last year, including myself. But when you don't do it, it's similar to Pacheco. When you don't take that step, the team is going to look to upgrade. And Josh Jacobs, their starting running back, is literally saying we need to upgrade at wide receiver. And it sounds like they're in the market for a guy like DK Metcalf or a guy like T. Higgins or whatever the case is. So A.D. Mitchell, also a guy that had some moments as a rookie, but might be wide receiver 4 on his team with Alec Pierce taking a step forward. Josh Downs is a stud. Michael Pittman wasn't healthy last year. I don't know. A.D. Mitchell, to me, I'm just not excited about him as a player. Moving into the quarterbacks and tight ends, again, I probably won't spend too much time on these guys. It was mainly running backs and wide receivers that we needed to talk about in this video. Drake May and Bryce Young, I talked about in January. If you want a full spiel on those guys, go ahead and check that out. Basically, I just believe in the quarterbacks. I think Drake May can run the ball. Bryce Young got some underrated weapons right now. I expect both teams to build around him, add offensive line help, add wide receiver help, and eventually these guys are going to end up being really solid producers, and both of them are under the age of 24 right now, which is really impressive considering I think you can make the argument that Drake May looks like one of the best young quarterbacks in the league, and towards the back half of the season, Bryce Young was playing at a very high level as well. So those two guys specifically, I'm buying into. It's going to cost you a decent amount of cash capital to go get them, but I do think they're good options. And if you have them on your roster, I would definitely just hold them and wait for them to accumulate more value. Tua Tagovailoa, I also talked about in the January video as well. Everybody's scared of the injury. I think it's more baked in than people realize, though. For a 27-year-old consistent back-end QB1 producer who's tethered to a great offensive mind with good weapons, with a big contract, like I don't really know why we're so scared of Tua's injuries. He doesn't seem to be as scared as the Dynasty community does. And I get, concussions and all that kind of stuff, but it's not like you would lose a third-round caliber asset if he were to retire. He's like an 8th-round pick right now, or 7th-round pick. And in Superflex leagues, for a guy to get as your QB2, who's going to produce like a back-end QB1, like, I don't know, dude. He seems like a really, really good option, knowing that why would I take Michael Penix in the 4th round when I could take Tua in the 7th round? Like, to me, it just doesn't make any sense. And that's why I think he's a great option as a buy right now. The other two big ones that I like that are additional buys that I didn't really talk about in the last one, Kyler Murray, who Danny and I debated back and forth on in yesterday's live stream, and then Dak Prescott. Here's the thing with Kyler. Has he played well since 2021-ish, before the injury? No, he hasn't. He hasn't been nearly as good as before the ACL tear. But this year, I feel like the redraft projection is going well for him. He's got Marvin entering year 2. McBride is in his prime. 2 capable running backs with James Conner and Trey Benson. The offensive line was really young, had a lot of raw pieces on it. It's starting to develop. Drew Petzig's a good offensive coordinator. they should and will add more wide receivers around Marvin Harrison Jr. Michael Wilson isn't really cutting it as your number 2. You don't really have a capable slot receiver at the moment. I think they're going to make a significant investment in wide receiver, whether it's a second-round pick or a free agent addition or something like that. I do think that Marvin will not be alone in this wide receiver core. And again, they're going to invest probably in giving a big contract to Trey McBride. So to me, the stars are aligning. There's very few quarterbacks in this league that can run the ball like Kyler Murray. And Kyler Murray had 25 point per game upside 2020, 2021. And I value him still as one of the best quarterbacks in Dynasty because he's just simply the type of dude that moves the needle at quarterback. There's very few guys like Jaden Daniels, like Jalen Hurts, like Lamar Jackson that from a production standpoint, who's still only 28 years old, that can move the needle like Kyler Murray does if he's playing at a high level, which hasn't happened in a couple of years. I'll give you that. But I still think he's going to hold his value. Even if the Cardinals were like not to have a good year next year and they moved on from Kyler, there'd be 5 or 6 teams lining up to pay this dude a big contract. So I'm not really that worried about Kyler Murray. I think as like a 3rd, 4th, 5th round startup asset, he is one of the best values on the board, in my opinion. And same goes for Dak Prescott, because Dak likes to get hated on a lot, but the reality is he's one of the best 8 to 10 quarterbacks passing the ball in the league and has probable upgrades coming to him at wide receiver. The Cowboys are meeting with Emeka Egbuka and Tet McMillan and all these guys. They're probably going to take a receiver at 12. And if they do take a receiver at 12, that along with CeeDee Lamb is going to really improve their passing game, and their running back position is probably going to get addressed in the draft as well. So for me, you have a mid to late first round pick, you're picking 109 and you're like, I'm a contender, I'm trying to win next year, and all I have is Geno Smith and, Joe Burrow at quarterback. Like, go trade your 109 for Dak Prescott, man. Like, I think you're going to get a really good productive quarterback who, is 31 years old, but he's going to have a couple more years left in the tank. And I would much rather go trade for Dak than spend a pick on Shedeur Sanders or even Cam Ward. Like, I like Cam Ward a lot, but I would still prefer Dak Prescott in a vacuum if I was a contender. If I was a rebuilder, I'd probably prefer Ward, but in a vacuum as a contender, I would probably prefer Dak and get the production that he can give you. So the sells at the quarterback position, I've kind of already talked about them already, but Jared Goff loses Ben Johnson. He's 30 years old, and the second he's not producing, he's going to lose value and honestly be in like Geno Smith territory. So I still think the Lions will be good, and I still think they'll have a productive offense, but Jared Goff is the biggest loser of Ben Johnson leaving, because I think Gibbs and Montgomery will become the center of this offense, and Jared Goff will not be nearly as efficient without Ben Johnson, because if you look at the volume of this offense, it's not like they throw the ball like crazy. It's going to be more, okay, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, they're doing the damage. Jared Goff goes from like a 30 touchdown passer to like probably a 22 touchdown passer, and that's going to really hurt his overall bottom line. I still think he's a good quarterback, a safe quarterback, big contract, all that kind of stuff. I just don't think the production will be nearly as good without Ben Johnson there. And with Michael Penix, I mean, I've given the spiel on him already, but it was impressive what he did in his 3 games as a starter. They were against really bad defenses, though. I was lower on him as a prospect. I think he's in a massive tier with all of the guys that I just kind of talked about: Dak, JJ, Bryce, Goff, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, all those dudes. They're all in this big cluster. And to me, Penix is at the end of it. That's simply how it is. If whoever was at the end of this tier, I'd be probably talking about selling, because they're all very similar in value. But whoever's at the end means that they're probably the least valuable, at least in my mind. And age-wise, I get the appeal with Michael Penix. I think he has a good arm. I think there's teams around the NFL that really have a decent respect for him. And if you wanted to rank him QB 17 or whatever coming out of startups because you like young quarterbacks versus older quarterbacks and you want to put him over Goff and Dak and those type of guys, I get it. I just prefer other guys in a vacuum, because I'm still questioning a little bit, how good of a quarterback is this guy really? That would be my only question with Penix. Maybe he's going to prove me wrong, but I worry that he's not quite the level of quarterback that would dictate him being over some of those other guys. So tight end position, and then we'll close this video out. Colston Loveland, I have very highly ranked compared to consensus. He is the prototype size after the combine, damn near 6'6", super long, rangy, 248, average size of the top 12 Dynasty tight ends. So Bowers, McBride, all the best tight ends in fantasy, 6'4.5", 245. He is a prototype size profile. He didn't test at the combine yet. At his pro day, he probably will. He's going to test pretty well. Market share production is very strong. Colston Loveland is the best fantasy tight end in this class. Tyler Warren, maybe real life-wise, a little bit better of a prospect, depending on who you ask. But even people in the real-life NFL, some think that Colston Loveland's the better player. So I think Loveland, the minute he gets drafted in the top 20 of the NFL draft, which is probably where he's going to go, I would say there's a good chance that he ends up becoming tight end 6 right away from the time he gets drafted. David Njoku being ranked tight end 13 is absolutely absurd to me. He is a top 8 tight end in 3 straight years, including tight end 4 in points per game last year, and he's about to get a QB upgrade with Cleveland. Why on earth is he ranked outside of tight end 1 range? 3 straight years. He's been a top 8 tight end, and he was tight end 4 last year. And he's 28, and he's really athletic, and he's not that old. Like, I don't really get the hate with David Njoku. He's one of my favorite targets in startups. Why would I spend a 4th-round pick on Sam Laporta when I can get David Njoku in like the 9th or 10th round and get decently the same production, a little bit more age on it? Like, I don't know. David Njoku is just like the easiest smash in all drafts for me. Probably of anyone on this list, I think he's actually like the biggest buy in general, let alone wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, or tight ends. Like, I think just in general, he's the biggest buy in Dynasty on this list. Andrews and Ingram, kind of the same thing. Like with the tight end position, here's the thing. I get why some people might prefer the younger tight ends to Andrews, Ingram. You want Kincaid or Pitts or whatever, I get it. But how often do young tight ends like not live up to their full potential at this position specifically? Because I don't rank running backs like this, where I rank older guys over younger guys because they've proven it already. But the tight end position is different. Like, the tight end position peaks age 27 to like 31. And the guys that we constantly want to do it at 23, 24, 25 years old seemingly don't do it. And that's what Kyle Pitts and Kincaid have kind of represented so far. So proven producers, man. Andrews and Ingram, if you're building out a contending team, just punt the position and take these guys because you're going to get really good production out of them for not a high price tag. And that's why I really like them in Dynasty value right now. You got a contender or a team that's coming into its contending window and you're like, hey, I don't really have a tight end right now. Go and swing on one of these dudes. You probably won't have to pay very much more than a mid-second for a guy like Mark Andrews, maybe even less for Evan Ingram. And I feel pretty good about their production ceiling that they have this year. Lastly, a couple of sells at the tight end position. I talked about Dalton Kincaid already. Why is he tight end 8 on the market? What are we doing here? I get he's 25 years old already, and he hasn't done anything, realistically. Like last year, I know he'll gain value if he starts producing, but Dawson Knox outsnapped him at the end of the season, and he's not even really the starter on his team anymore based on what we've seen. And Kincaid, yeah, he was a first-round pick, and he's tethered to Josh Allen. If it works out, he's going to really skyrocket up the position, but I'm losing patience for Dalton Kincaid to develop at the next level because he was an older prospect coming in. Through 2 years, he hasn't been productive. Like, he should be producing at this point in time, in my opinion. And then Isaiah Likely, kind of similar to Braylon Allen of running backs, where I get why people are projecting him. He's actually ranked higher than Mark Andrews on the market right now because probably Andrews is older. People are thinking he's going to fall off. But again, even though he's under 25 by like a hair and he could still produce as a tight end 1 producer by like 2026 or something like that, I think he's a good hold. Don't get me wrong, but I think I would shop him on the open market if I had a lot of Isaiah Likely in my leagues. So if you guys want all of the Dynasty trade value chart goodness that you could possibly want, head on over to flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up, and you'll get access to these Dynasty trade value charts. You'll get access to our Dynasty rookie rankings, our overall startup rankings, top 250s for Superflex for 1 quarterback. You'll get our Dynasty rookie draft guide, which has the top 30 rookies written up, graded, in-depth, detailed write-ups and analysis on those players. We're going to have another 20 to 25 of those coming very, very soon in the middle of March. And we'll also have combine stuff and measurements and all that kind of stuff added after combines and pro days have happened. You will be very prepared for your Dynasty rookie draft, your Dynasty startup drafts by heading to flockfantasy.com and using that promo code FSE. This is one of the best times of the year to make deals, sell players, buy players, all that kind of stuff. With the draft coming up, with free agency coming up, you're going to want to keep it tapped in over on Flock Fantasy. If you are an annual Motherflocker code user with code FSE, you get a free team review voucher to use from us, from me or Danny, and a free buy, sell, hold report voucher to use from us as well. In your email, you'll have instructions on how to redeem that once you sign up, but you basically just go to personal advice. You'll see team review or trade questions there. Trade questions, follow the prompts, slide the slider at the end to get to buy, sell, hold report on our name. Team review, load your team in using our My Teams feature, which is another great feature of the site, and you can submit your team for review from either of us. So if that all interests you, link down below in the pinned comment and in the description. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.